There we go. Okay, thanks everyone for coming for our fourth presentation in the seminar series. Today we have two presenters. Bill Baltutis is a Executive Director of the Transportation Management Association of Lake County in Deerfield, Illinois. He's been there since its formation in 1989. The TMA mission is to improve employees' commute to work in Cook and Lake counties. Since the program was started, today the Shuttle Bug, which you'll be hearing about later, has 13 routes carrying approximately 1,000 riders each day, serving over 40 firms with 40,000 employees. Bill also is a member of the Association for Commuter Transportation, a member of the Lake County Transportation Alliance, and he received his Bachelor of Arts in History and Economics from Northern Illinois University, but he's also received his master's degree in urban planning from the University of Illinois at Chicago, so we have a fellow up here among us. Our second presenter is Grzesiakowski, who has worked in various aspects of transportation, including marketing, market development, planning, community outreach, and transportation demand management since 1980. Tim is the Marketing and Operations Assistant for the TMA of Lake County, and he has worked in various public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including Marketing Manager for PACE in Arlington Heights, Illinois, Commuter Transportation Manager for Hewitt Associates in Lincolnshire, and Project Manager, Commute Options for the Metropolitan Planning Council of Chicago. With that, I will leave it to Bill to start us off. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my name is Bill Baltutis. I'm the Executive Director of the TMA. Back home, but this wasn't home for me. The BSB was the Behavioral Science Building in the 80s when I was taking classes here and all that. And but it's nice to be back at UIC. Since this is kind of a research group with the Transportation Center, I should start out with a joke on research. And this was actually told to me by when I took a course in land use law, which you may have taken or not, discussions on that. And so there was a statistician, an engineer, and a lawyer in the room. Statistician, lawyer, engineer in the room. And they asked him, how much was 1 plus 1? So the engineer said 1 plus 1 equals 2.000000. That's what the engineer said. And then that's the statistician. He said, how much is 1 plus 1? And he said 1 plus 1, there's a 99.99% chance with the possibility that 1 plus 1 equals 2. I wasn't quite sure on that. And then he asked the lawyer, and she said, the lawyer said, 1 plus 1. Looked around the room, he said, what number do you want? So, as we know, data can be interpreted different ways and all that, but I'm not talking about data today. Tim and I'm going to take the first half, and Tim is going to take the second half of this presentation. Hopefully that will give you some enlightenment, an idea of what's going on here. You know, we're in the city here, right in the heart of the city and all that. There's a lot of activity and all that, but there's a world beyond that. We all know it's the suburbs, and there's a lot of employment there and activity. And the question is connectivity. How do we connect that? There's a lot of infrastructure and all that, so we're going to be talking about that. Okay, so TMAs are called Transportation Management Associations. They've been around since I would say at least 25, 30 years. There's a lot of them. There's about 126 of them. There's a lot of them on the Pacific Coast and on the East Coast. They're involved with facilitating public-private partnerships to improve employee mobility and air quality. Some of them, a lot of them were formed in California because of the air quality issues. You know, there's more stringent regulations on air quality in the California area, and employers were required to reduce trips, and how do you do that, and how do you manage it, and all that. And there's actually a regulatory body that does that. And so TMAs were formed to kind of manage that in certain areas. There's also a lot of, or not a lot, but a number of communities and areas that want to manage and address transportation issues through development agreements. In other words, a major company comes out, like Sears. When Sears was relocated out from the city of Chicago, and it went out to Shuttle Bug, now it's back in Chicago, so what comes around goes around. But when they went out there, the municipality there, in this case my name is Hoffman Estates, made a requirement that you had to reduce the number of trips coming out here. They didn't want to impact the development, in fact, the community there. So they formed a TMA called the Prairie Stone. And you have that in other areas too, in Southern California, that not only deal with air quality issues, but how development impacts whether a city or suburban area, traffic. So, so there's a whole variety of reasons. There's no one that fits all, but there's a whole variety of reasons. Public-private partnerships is part of that equation. There's two of them here. I mentioned Prairie Stone, and we were formed in the late 80s. Now, our service area, as it was mentioned, is to improve employees' commute to work. Our Lake Cook Road is kind of our focused area, but we go all the way out west or north to Lake Forest and south to Glenview. And you can see some of the metro stations we serve. There's 3 metro lines on there: the UP North, the Milwaukee District North line, and the North Central line. So you can see we're about 25 miles from downtown Chicago. That's out in the burbs, quite a distance. So that's kind of a focus of our membership and our involvement with Shuttle Bug services that was mentioned, those 13 shuttles. We represent about 40 firms and 42,000 employees. And we also advocate for highway and transit improvements. It kind of varies, but the mode split out there is, it kind of actually varies by company and all that, but some companies are really involved with transit. Maybe up to 25% of those employees are involved in taking transit one way or the other. Not every day, but they do take it. But maybe on average about 10% who are involved with some kind of program or involvement with our TMA. Obviously, you come down the city, it's just the opposite, but that's reflective of the density, the level of service, and all that kind of thing. We also involved with a lot of highway issues too, because there's a tollways intersect there, 294. There's a lot of road improvements and all the transportation agencies. And the other thing we do is we kind of connect all those with communities, working with communities, and working with the private sector, because the private sector oftentimes does not have a voice to speak to the public sector on these issues. So we come to the table with those issues, employee commute options, and also addressing highway improvements. Some of the member companies are Walgreens, UL, Underwriters Labs, Baxter, Allstate, Discovers. You're all probably familiar with those. So these are some of the major corporations that their corporate headquarters are out in the north suburbs. Our Shuttle Bug program is that service area that was talked about off of Lake Cook Road and to Lake Forest down to Glenview area, and bisecting those lines there, the metro lines. So again, there's a CBD. We're about 25 miles from there. So that's our little corner of the world. Significant if you live and work there, but maybe not so if you're not in that area. But so you could kind of see that's where we operate on in the employers we work with. The Shuttle Bug is 13 routes. They link one CTA station, the Skokie Swift station. One of our routes goes out to Skokie Swift, and 7 metro stations, and 4 employment centers in Lake Forest, Lake Cook Road, Deerfield Road, and then parts of Glenview. And if you go down these corridors, you probably, if you go down 294, you see these campuses, particularly, location. Many corporations locate off of interstates for accessibility and all that. So those employers are there, like Lake Cook Road and 294. It's just a dense hub of employers. Probably that area there is probably 15 to 20,000 employees, and if you take the whole corridor, maybe 50,000. And then, the whole idea of transit, if you need transit, as I always tell people, you need that kind of density. You need enough mass for mass transit. You need enough mass for mass transit. I always tell people that when they say, well, I want a bus in my here or that little business down and there's not very many people, it's not going to work very well. Or you can work, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. So there's always enough mass for mass transit. And just a couple other things. It's a partnership. The partnership between the TMA, who represents the private sector firms, and public agencies, PACE and Metro. And it's a financial arrangement. The employers pay 50% of the cost of that shuttle service. And I don't know if you're probably involved with the financial side of transit, particularly in this area here, there's a thing called recovery ratio. Recovery ratio, that's how much money transit recovers from fares over the cost of the service. And it varies by entity. CTA and Metro, about 50%. They get 50% of their revenue from the fares. The rest are subsidized, generally through the RTA, Regional Transportation Authority. And you go out in the suburbs with PACE suburban bus, it's only about 20 to 30%. Much lower because of lower density. So there's a thing in there in how that works. So, but in our program, serving suburban employers is 50%. So this is a win-win, win for employers because they get service, and win for the transit agencies because they get higher revenue for that service, for delivering that service. And of course, it's the last mile issue. It's been a discussion over many sectors, not only in Chicago, but other areas, urban areas where transit is delivered, particularly in suburban areas. If you live in a city, well, generally there's many trains and bus services are within a quarter-mile walking. You get out to the suburbs, that's not the case. You get off at the metro station, I don't know where, let's just say Buffalo Grove. There's not good service to make connections to get to your employers for the most part. And so how do you get from that transit hub, that train station, to an employer 2 miles away? Well, I guess you could walk and maybe even bike, but that is not convenient. Our service is door to door, meaning from the train station, people walk. The buses are scheduled with the trains to arrive and depart, and they get generally to the front door of their office. And even though PACE provides a lot of service along major corridors like Lake Cook Road or Willow Road or Route Cermak or whatever you want, major arterial roads out in the suburbs, it is really a challenge if you're out there taking a bus and your office is maybe even a quarter-mile away. You have to walk across parking lots and open fields, snow. I mean, it's really a huge inconvenience. So even that quarter mile in the suburbs is much different than the quarter-mile connection you have to do in the city. So that's why we're trying to address that. One of the things we did do, Lake Cook Road was our first station we targeted for Lake Cook. Lake Cook Road, which is at the border of Lake Cook and Lake County. Up there is we also got a grant to $50,000 to provide sidewalks. So within a half a mile of that train station, we connected a lot of sidewalks that were, developers build sidewalks up to their property line. And going beyond that is a cost issue. So how do you connect all those and make it work so it connects to that? So we connected a number of developments in that area with these sidewalks. So that's also part of that last mile issue. Pace Suburban Bus, who's one of our partners, does the service planning, but we really only operate in the the weekday rush hour. We tried midday service, didn't really take off the ground. It was really not a market for midday. People generally stay in their offices, and the corporations, the major ones, make it easy to do that. They have good cafeterias with great food. They have amenities, Starbucks baristas there. They got the whole 9 yards of amenities. They have cleaners. They have it all. I mean, it's like a little, you go to, we were just at Allstate or Baxter, they have all these amenities, so obviously they would like to have the workers around, and they can stay in facilities. Some people do that. Maybe that was happening 20 years ago. It's not happening so much now. People are staying at their corporate facilities, generally for lunch and those kind of things. Again, we use a venture pass so the employees can ride free. That's part of the agreement we have with the companies. And it served to, again, mention the front doors of the buildings to make that front door. This is a typical schedule, one that is along Lake Cook Road that accesses a number of businesses along there. As you can see here, this one has two stops. There's actually, generally, the ones on Lake Cook Road might have 4 morning trips and about 4 to 6, depending upon their location, because they have to recirculate. Those buses pick up people, take them to the train station, they come back, and that has to work like clockwork, particularly picking up people and getting them to the train on time. So that's kind of a scheduling thing that Pace puts together schedules, although we, as the TMA, put the input on what the time's pushing it.
About the venture passes, are they the standard monthly venture passes that can be used?
They're just specialized passes.
Blue ones, Dr. Siraj, they're coded differently. They look like very similar to the regular ones, but they're really coded differently by Cubic. They're designed to use on shuttle bug routes.
Okay.
Could you use these on a CG? Yeah, but it causes a lot of havoc. So you really want to use it only for shuttle bugs. Yeah, the companies that participate pay, and then their employees get them.
Gotcha.
Yeah, those passes are actually used by Pace for a lot of students who ride free in school districts. So the Pace use those similar type of passes there.
If you're not an employee, how much would it cost?
$1.70 or
The regular
$2 now is the cash fare. Yeah.
And we have
Or you can use your
designated
great value card
stops.
as well.
Yeah, we have designated stops. We try to limit. They don't go off route, but they can pick up people who are along the route, and people kind of know where those locations are. Kind of time sensitive. In the evening, the buses have to get to the train station on time. That's the number one priority that people want.
And all of these routes are public bus service.
Yeah.
So even though companies may subsidize part of it, if somebody wants to flag it down and pay with a gray venture card or a cash fare or whatever, they are public bus service. So they will take passengers other than the employees of those companies. Many times also what happens is some companies have Bill and I are contractors at Baxter. We are housed at Baxter Healthcare in Deerfield. Some companies don't let their contractors provide the passes. I think they should, which I'll get into in a little when I in my part of the presentation, but some places are like, no, contractors, they treat them separately.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of format. That's one of the schedules of one of the routes that we serve along Lake Cook Road. There's a lot of communities that are very supportive of this. improves their quality of life. It offers options to driving alone. Lake Cook Road is that's 40 to 50,000 average daily traffic on Lake Cook Road. This kind of helps some of the congestion on Lake Cook Road. That's why we've gotten grants for the CMAQ grants, air condition mitigation, air quality grants, and we identify the benefits of congestion reduction and air quality improvements. It can help areas' economic development. More and more employers are looking, suburban employers are looking for facilities that provide some sort of transit. Not all of them, but they're realizing their force is shifting. It's kind of dynamic, and more employers are looking at trying to recruit and retain employees. I'll talk a little bit about that, but by providing facilities that have transit connections in the suburbs, that is a positive for employers because they're locating somewhere, but it's one of the main things they're looking for is attracting and retaining employees. So their force is shifting from maybe more suburban centric to city centric. In other words, millennials and others who live in the city like those amenities, but jobs are out in the suburbs, so that's important. So that makes a benefit for businesses who are looking for that. Many number of developers who have development units like John Buck, and now it's another firm that has an office park, uses that hook to lease their properties. They put on their listings, accessibility to transit, and selling, leasing space in their suburban facilities, because more and more the workforce is shifting and a lot of people are coming from the city out to the suburbs to do that. It helps traffic congestion and it addresses the air quality issues. Employer benefits, this program provides shared expenses, the minimum company administration. It may sound simple, but there's a lot of details in setting these things up and billing and all that kind of stuff. They just sign an agreement and they pay us a check. They don't deal with all the paperwork involved and all the agreements we have with Pace and Metra and the service planning, all those kind of things. They again attract and retain quality workforce. That's a big issue. I think if you talk to HR people, particularly in suburban areas, talent is looking for good talent around. So it's real important for them to have that. Some employers actually have moved back to the city, McDonald's and Sears and all that, because of that issue, or one of the issues they moved back into the central city. Can help employers with diversity issues, reduces parking needs. That's an issue for some employers where they are getting maxed out by the requirement. They can't add more parking, or they have to, the surface lot has to be a multi-storied one, which costs much more than a surface lot. So they're looking at transit as to help buffer that. It helps employers that are in supporting environmental goals to support LEED qualifications. If you have a designated transit program, you can get points to do that to help them green commute. So, and many employers want to have that marquee that they're involved with LEED and all that LEED, and that's important. Employees, they get the free ride with the Venture Pass. They do have to pay for their Metro service, although some employers do support transit benefits. Tim will probably talk a little bit about that later, but it's programs like the RTA program or WageWorks, any number of programs that contribute financially to the cost of commuting. And that's not taxable under the federal, up to a certain ceiling, and that can really help people. Some companies pay close to 50% or more of the cost of the Metro Pass for people, a monthly pass. So that's very helpful for people. And so that, you know, your transit costs are taken care of. We found out that probably close to 30% of our riders do not have cars. Do not have cars. They could not get to out in the burbs. So if your transportation commuting costs for employment are being taken care of by your employer for the most part, that's a big hook to induce you to work for that firm. And of course, they want your skills to help them out. So the trade-off there. You know, the whole thing of being less stressful. I mean, one of the things you probably know in the transportation field, commuters want reliable service. You take a car and you live and work in Lake Cook Road or that area here, coming out is not too bad, but going back into the city in the evening can be you don't know what, it could take you 1 hour, you're nodding, or 2 hours, depending upon traffic, you know, because of the variability of traffic. Of course, everyone has an app or Waze or whatever to look at that and all that, but you say, oh my God, I'm going to be late for whatever because the traffic situation, and that's hard to control. You take transit, for the most part, not all things being equal, Metro's very reliable and our transit service is pretty reliable. So that connection, getting to and from, is a big positive for employees. And again, some companies offer the pre-tax benefits. What makes a successful shuttle program? Well, again, that mass concentration of employers in a certain area. Generally, most of our routes involve 2 to 4 employers with a sizable employee headcount, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 employees total. So we're talking about large corporations. This is not going to work with, you know, 4 companies with 100 people. I mean, you're not going to generate the level of demand that will satisfy the requirements to get a good number of people taking the shuttle. These are employees generally travel long distance. They're not going to get on one metro station and go for just 2 stops and get back on and get to a shuttle. These are people like who commute generally from the city, a reverse commute group, and come out. And there's about, some come from the suburbs. Generally, it's about 60+% are reverse commuters. 60% or more are reverse commuters that live in the city or close to the city and come out to the suburbs. But we do get a suburb-to-suburb market, but much smaller, that come from, say, a Fox Lake or Waukegan and come out and come down to the Lake Cook or Braeside stations in that area. Again, they live along metro lines. The frequent metro service. Metro obviously has a variety of service, but you have to target areas where that service can get 3 or 4 buses or trains to and from the employers to their employment sites. We have a couple of, again, the 3 lines we talked about. North Central does not work very well. That's the line that goes to Norfolk Road, Wheeling, and Franklin Park, etc. That line, Metro, increased service, but it probably has about 50 daily trains versus close to 100 at Deerfield. So there's a much higher level of service of that line. And obviously less services, less frequency, and less time to make have viable shuttle routes. So again, all these partnerships that we continue to work on. So, current initiatives, is that where we're
That's
going
where
to
we're
switch?
transitioning. Yes.
Okay. All yours, Tim.
Thanks, Bill. And by the way, we are the TMA. This is the 2 of us. So if the building blows up, this is, you know, we are both the
Yeah, I have to walk out of the room now because
Right.
just in case.
So I'm going to talk about some initiatives. And since I grew up in Chicago, lived in the suburbs, lived out of state for almost 14 years, and then came back to Chicago in 1989. And ironically, and when Ed talked about my different jobs, most of my jobs have been working with the TMA at some point. When I was at Pace, I worked with them. When I was at Hewitt, I worked with him because Hewitt was and still is a member company now known as AON. When I was at MPC, I worked with them, and now I'm working for them for over 2 years. So you never know, be nice to people because you never know what's going to happen. We have a number of initiatives both in the northern suburbs and outside of the area that I'm going to talk about. And like I say, we're investigating, we'll go through some details on this. A few years ago, the RTA, Regional Transportation Authority, gave the TMA a grant to expand the Shuttle Bug model to other parts of the Chicago area. As you've heard from those who know me, the Chicago area is the largest area in the United States without a formal transportation demand management program. I know the Chamber of Commerce would not like to hear me say that, but it is the truth. We tried a few years ago when I was at MPC to get one in, and funding was an issue. The companies, having worked in the northern suburbs for 2 of my jobs in the Chicago area, the companies up there get it. They understand this stuff. They understand that people need a connection. We get calls from developers or real estate people saying, is there transportation service from our building? That's the nice kind of question to get. We like those kind of questions as opposed to everybody drives, which you get a lot of times, or well, let them figure it out. We're not in the business to do that. So we got a grant a couple years ago to test this model in other markets. It started in 2013, about 2 years ago, and expires next year, and I'll go through some of those things. So the first one that we did was in Downers Grove, the Route 465 Belmont Station. And it's a major, Hamilton Partners is the developer. It's a major complex, major office complex. It began in April of 2015. The test will end in April of 2017. The ridership is not quite where it needs to be. It's in around 40 passengers a day. It needs to be about 60. But here's some challenges, and I'm going to talk a lot about those, is that 2 companies in the park who said they were going to sign on run their private shuttles. Those private shuttles are taking away riders from 465, and there's other factors which I'll go into in a minute. We're in discussions right now with the developer and with RTA in terms of, do we keep this? Do we do something else? What happens? So stay tuned. We are also currently in discussions with the Oakbrook Chamber of Commerce, PACE, and RTA about a service in that area, also in DuPage County. When I joined PACE in 1989, I didn't work on this project, but PACE ran a shuttle network in the late 80s in Oakbrook. They spent a lot of money, they put a lot of buses and a lot of service in, and it lasted a year or 2, I think. Did not last a long time. Oakbrook is a tough market to serve. The infrastructure has got some real challenges in terms of the street network, in terms of sidewalks or lack of sidewalks and so forth. For a while, the village also was involved, and they didn't know, do you serve the workers, do you serve the residents, do you serve, and my comment at a meeting several years ago was, pick one market and focus on that. If you try to serve 4 markets, you will serve no one. So discussions are underway, data collection's underway on this. Again, there's a few employers there that have operated private shuttles in the past. Some have worked, some have not. We think this is going to be up and running in 2017. 640 Braeside, as Bill mentioned, this is a route, this is an old route. Sometimes old routes come back again in different versions. The first version operated from 2002 to 2003 was discontinued because of low ridership. The second version started in December of 2014. It goes between Braeside Metro and Highland Park. UL's campus in Northbrook and Walgreens campus has a campus in Northbrook also. We are going to extend this to our campus at Baxter for some trips. And again, it's a new version of an old route. It also, the UP North line, as I learned in my Hewitt days, and still has the popular residential areas. It has the Clybourne Station with Lincoln Park and Bucktown. It has the Ravenswood Station, it has Rogers Park, it has Evanston. It has the places people want to live more so than the Milwaukee North line. So it's an important market to serve. 638 Arlington Park to HSBC, that began in June of this year. HSBC relocated from Ottawa to Arlington Heights. This is in our service area. Arlington Heights is part of our service area. This runs between the Arlington Park Metro Station and their new facility. What we run into, and I'm going to talk about in a little bit, is Vehicles. Pace, because of a lot of issues, including the whole state funding issue, does not have standard-sized vehicles. They're running this with 12-passenger vehicles, which do have a fare box, but it really limits you in terms of if you have standees, you end up having to go with another vehicle, which is not cheap. So it's another thing that we are looking at in terms of how to address this. Bannockburn, which is just north of us, is also interested in reviving Shuttle Bug service. I used to pay for 2 routes out of my budget when I was at Hewitt, so this is another version of an old route that was discontinued because of ridership changes, and now there's some reflurry into that market. Shire, which is the spin-off of Baxter, is located in Bannockburn. They are currently operating their own shuttle. They want to get out of the bus business. A lot of companies don't want to be in the bus business. They don't want to deal with the headaches. They'd rather have someone else do this for them. So there's work underway to see what the market's like in this area. So yeah, there's interest in expanding service, but we face a lot of challenges in doing so, and we try to take the leads in this. As I mentioned, vehicle capability. This little bus is the 12 or 13 passenger. That's what Pace has been able to give us so far. Sometimes they can take standees, sometimes they can't. They're also talking about vans because they have a successful van pull program. There were some real challenges because, again, if you get more people that can fit on these, you have to go to another vehicle, which is more cost. Private carriers, and I'm of the mindset that there is enough business in the market for everybody. If you go downtown, you will see at my Union Station or Ogilvy Station, you'll see a lot of private buses there taking people to University, to Rush and to the Aon Center and that. It's also the case in the suburbs. When I was at Hewitt, I had a mix of Shuttle Bug and I also had some private service. Baxter currently is using private service. There are a lot of companies out there that are willing to run buses for them, and they do generally do a good job. This is typically more expensive than Shuttle Bug, but sometimes price is not the only factor. Many times it is, but not always. Sometimes companies say, we want a service that only our employees can ride. We don't want them riding with other people. Or it's also not subject to transit regulations. So for example, Pace has service standards, and they look at those standards to say if there aren't enough riders, they will either reduce or eliminate service. If it's a private carrier, 2 people on it, and the company says we want to run it, they'll run it. I personally believe there is a market for both. The world of work has changed a lot, okay? 20 years ago when I worked for Pace, Bill mentioned the corporate relocation of Sears. I worked on that when we moved 5,000 people from, at that time, the Sears Tower, now the Willis Tower, out to Hoffman Estates, which had virtually no transit service, and almost no one who worked for Sears lived in that area. And we had a network of services, some that don't exist, some that still do, but many of the things we put in place over 20 years ago still exist today. I always say, even the Salvation Army moved out of Chicago 20 years ago. They had an office near Chicago at Dearborn, and they even moved out. The trend is going in the other direction now. Bill talked about some of the big companies moving downtown. A lot of people work remotely, a lot of people hotel. Jobs have either gone out of state or out of the country or don't exist anymore. Corporate relocations have changed. As I mentioned, 20, 25 years ago, there was a head tax on payroll in Chicago. Companies were moving. Sears moved out of the Sears Tower at the time. Fast forward to the to 2000 and 2010s. Okay, Wall Street Journal article, young talent wants to live they don't want to be in Libertyville. Motorola built a huge facility. We worked on that at Pace, and now they moved back to the merchandise mart. The other trend I'm seeing from comparing this from the real estate folks is that repositioning of office buildings in the suburbs. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens with that. And obviously it's going to take zoning laws and that type of thing. But the Barnes & Noble in Lincolnshire, right near my old office at Hewitt, is now a medical facility. It's not that old of a building. And I have a clip here from the Daily Herald that the old CDW Wall Street building in Vernon Hills is going to be, they want to put a psych hospital in there. So I think you're going to see repositioning. The real estate developers are very worried about what happens, but I think there needs to be some creative thinking and probably zoning law changes to address some of these issues. Gas prices. I just came back from vacation, and a friend of mine sent me a clip that Megabus is cutting its service in Chicago, and one of the reasons is low gas prices. Gas prices have dropped for several years. More people are driving. VMT was down for many years and has started to creep up in the past few years, up 3.3%. There is a downside of cheap gas, and that Illinois' fatality rate has gone up 24% according to the National Safety Council. And our shuttle ridership has been impacted. We're seeing fewer riders than we did a few years ago because gas prices are cheap. Metro fares also. Metro just passed a fare increase that's going to take effect in February. I think it's about an average of 5 or 6%. They had an 11% fare hike in February 2015. That affected their ridership, but most of our Shuttle Bug riders come off of Metro, so that fare increases also are impacting that. The TNCs, the transportation network companies, the Ubers and the Lyfts and the Vias and all of those type of things, that still has a to-be-determined effect on relationship. Even Anthony Ponce, former Channel 5 anchor, is now driving for Lyft. In the suburbs, my comment always was, okay, yes, in the city I know you can, contact Uber or Lyft and get a ride in a few minutes, but what about in Deerfield, Illinois? Is it going to take you 3 hours to get one? Well, no. I had lunch with a colleague in Lincolnshire, and he said, let's try it and see. And we were able, they were able to promise a ride within 8 or 9 minutes. I also did an informal survey of our receptionist at Baxter, and I said, how have you seen TNCs? Because there's a guard gate. You can't just show up there. You have to be on a list to get in. You can't just drive in there. And she said that our taxi business is down about 50%. We're in the international headquarters. And I said, where do people go in TNCs, and how do they know that they're supposed to be here? And she said they have a make and a model of a car and so forth when someone's requested them. Typically where people are going is O'Hare Airport or the train stations when shuttles aren't running. TNCs have been talked about a lot in terms of a possible solution for these last mile markets where there isn't enough for a bus. We see this a lot where their routes were cut that were shuttle bug routes, or we get questions from companies saying, what about a route, from our building to the train station? And there's really not the density that Bill talked about, that you need to have it. This could be a way to address some of those lower density markets. The verdict is still out on that. As you saw in an earlier slide, Allstate, big insurance company, is one of our members and shuttle bug participants, and I think the liability issue in terms of the TNC still is going to the verdict is still out here. So what have we learned? Despite all the hype about companies moving to Chicago, and I won't discount that, though again I say read between the lines, because many times companies that had 2,000 people in a Northfield or someplace might move 1,000 down to the city. Look at the square footage that they're leasing if compared to what they had. Many times it's a way to reduce headcount. It's a cost-cutting measure. There's more to it than, it may be a headquarters location, but the back office stuff is still done elsewhere. How this market, I've done this kind of work for many years, and I've seen it shift, and it's probably going to shift again. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 5 to 10 to 20 years when millennials get older, when they start having kids of school age. Is Wicker Park and Ravenswood going to look as attractive to them, or will the suburbs be more attractive when they have school age kids? It remains to be seen. The best information I've learned is stay on top of trends. Realize what might stick and what might not. Don't be the first to jump on every trend that happens there, but you've got to be cognizant of those happening. I use my own case. When I worked for Hewitt for 11 years, I managed these programs. I was on the corporate side of this, and I managed them here and in other parts of the U.S. and I did some worldwide stuff. Hewitt back then was kind of ahead of its time because many big companies, the technology companies, the Googles and those kind of places have a person that's dedicated to doing transportation. And I was like the lone wolf out here doing that type of thing. But even back then, even going back 5 or 6 years ago, I was based in Lincolnshire. I could hotel at an office at 120 South Riverside Plaza, which I used to do when I had meetings in Chicago. I could transfer my phone there. You didn't know, even though I had an 847 number, if I was sitting in Chicago, in Lincolnshire, or in Timbuktu. I could do all my computer work from there. We're seeing that as a trend also, either between people working from home part of the time or all of the time, which affects shuttle ridership, unfortunately, or companies setting up hoteling stations. Allstate has an IT group. I think they moved downtown. Walgreens has done it. Many of the major companies have put hoteling locations or a division or something for people that want to split how they work. It does impact shuttle ridership, unfortunately. Again, want to thank you very much. We are around for questions. We've got our contact information up there, and thanks for letting us speak. Yes,
I have a question. How is the Shuttle Bug service marketed either by TMA or by the member companies to prospective employees and riders?
I'll give you Baxter's example, and I'll give you Hewitt's too, actually, because we were former Shuttle Bug, but I know what I did there. I can speak to that. I'm not sure what they're doing today, but I can speak to that. So Baxter has a Northern Illinois commuting page, and it's an intranet site. So basically, any employee can go there to say, here are my options for commuting services. Many of the companies, I had an intranet site when I was at Hewitt as well too. Many of the companies also included as part of their new hire orientation. And that's the way we want people. So if somebody walking in the door of the XYZ company knows, I have an option, I don't necessarily have to drive by myself. The other thing we do, and we've just finished a round of them, is benefits fairs. When companies are enrolling for their benefits, we're there with Blue Cross and MetLife and the EAP and all of that type of thing. I have a marketing background from my undergrad from DePaul, and my feeling is transportation and commuting services is a product, and you market that product just like you market Blue Cross and MetLife and whoever. It is a benefit like those are. Not everybody's going to use it, not everybody's going to be a customer, but that's the way you get people. I find those kind of events are better than if you just have a transportation table, because you get a wider audience and you get people that might not stop by and might not want to talk to you that will.
I'll just add to that. What we're able to do with the TMA is to leverage, or maybe better spoke, is to institutionalize promotion of transit within a corporation. Now, a transit agency can send out something to XYZ company. What they do with it, who knows? But like Tim said, we identify people in the organizations, and it can be from HR or facilities, that work as kind of a transit coordinator. So when we inform them of the kind of skills to do to get the word out, and the web page is one thing, the transit fairs are others. If there's special notices, that's the point of contact. If there's a breakdown in service, for example, how would you know that? Well, we have identified people in security, generally security, that will notify employees of the service breakdown. Now, so basically, there's a connection between getting the information to the user, and we used the arrangements with the corporation to get it out digitally and otherwise. That's how we do it. As opposed to just like, you send something out to XYZ company, well, whether those employees or the right employees get that information is questionable. So it's more targeted, and we leverage the resources of that company. So they're running around and putting together this information on their website. They're getting the word out. They post things here and there on the services. We don't do that. So you basically make things more efficient and more cost effective than having a marketing plan that you do all the work. The companies do a good part of that work.
The other thing is that the best compliment I used to get at Hewitt, and I ran actually into one of my former coworkers in my library a few months ago, who said, we benefit from what you put in for us. They said, we would not have taken this job, or we would not have stayed as long at this company if this service didn't exist. When I get a compliment like that, it's like, then I know I've done my job. Yes?
I have a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
And most of them relate to scale of the services and the different routes. I mean, because from what you've said, I imagine some of your routes have been in place for a long time, others are newer that come up. And you're talking about the vehicle issue with capacity of 12. I'm guessing that sometimes you need more than one vehicle to meet trains. And I wonder how much you might be missing in terms of these longevity routes, in terms of local people starting to coordinate and sort of grow the demand for transportation service if you don't have the ability to expand capacity. So in other words, you might be able to get some synergy going with people coordinating transportation that you might miss. And in other areas, maybe the TMC solution is more practical if you can't fill your 12-person vehicle or whatever. Or if companies, if you're really totally focused on the commute to those few companies, without wanting to necessarily expand the service to the public. So I'm seeing this in my mind. I'm sort of imagining this range of scales, and how do you differentiate and make those kinds of decisions? Do you have any flexibility to do that? To sort of...
Well, it's a big challenge because really our provider is the PACE, and as you probably know, in Northeastern Illinois, we have a capital funding issue, and maybe after this election, there'll be discussions on more capital needs, including transit, including more vehicles. That being said, it's still a challenge. We're down to smaller vehicles in some cases, and TNCs might be an answer, but they're more costly. I mean, there's always a trade-off. Our service is 30 to 40% cheaper than a private service. So you get the convenience of that service, but so some companies can afford that, other companies can't. I mean, they just not in their budget to spend X more for private service.
Right, but you don't necessarily have the opportunity to take advantage of economies of scale if you are restricted by vehicle size.
Yeah.
I mean, you're automatically sort of stuck.
By
Right?
vehicle size and availability of vehicles.
And availability.
Yeah.
So,
Although we're negotiating with PACE and PACE is working on this to allow standees on these smaller vehicles. That's one of the big things is, you have a 15-passenger vehicle. What happens when a 16-passenger comes out for that one day?
Yeah.
What do you do? Well, if you can allow or have the straps and all that kind of thing installed, because a traditional bus allows standees, that increases the capacity maybe by 30% more. So that could be a short-term option. Long-term option is more vehicles or the TNCs, whatever. I mean, it is kind of a challenging area we're in because I can say that because of that, we have lost opportunities with a number of companies who are relocating, and if we could provide them a service proposal, they would have probably they've gone private, but they're paying much more money than they probably would want to.
Right, okay, so there is sort of a natural limitation
Yeah.
on the scale.
Yeah, but I would say that's across the board in transportation.
Right,
Roads need to be widened, transportation facilities need to be improved, capacity needs to address, you probably know the MPC, or not MPC, but the needs that have been talked about for this region of $40 billion worth of funds needed to address this. And Jim Riley, the former head of RTA, was at a presentation of ours. He pointed out this controller that was built during the administration of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was used to control a major intersection where trains are,
Right.
so, and that causes delays and all that. So the long and short of it is, it's a big issue for any transportation provider, public or private, or public in particular.
do you do data sharing with PACE? I mean, is anyone doing the data analysis for, your ridership, your
PACE does
PACE
capacity?
does that.
Yeah, the venture cards allow that.
Yeah.
They can allow, like we have, sometimes we have capacity issues by runs and we can get that data. PACE operations provides that.
And they share that
Yeah.
information with you so that
Yeah.
you can use it
Right.
strategically?
Right,
Okay.
right. The other thing I'll mention is we were at a conference in Boston, an ACT conference recently. I didn't put the slide up, but it was a real good slide one of the presenters had there who ran TMAs and said, in strategic planning for the future, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. And they included, which TMA services are still relevant? What are the consequences of eliminating certain services? What are new services that are needed? What's the makeup of who we serve and what are the growth sectors? Who do our funders, public and private sectors, see as the roles of TMAs? So I mean, you've got, as I mentioned, you've got to keep it on top of trends, see what's happening, and just kind of see how the market is going to shift, and realize some things are short-lived, some are longer.
Okay. But it has to be really important to be able to properly analyze that market.
Yes. Yes. Any other questions? Is it as clear as mud, or does it make sense?
I told you I had a lot of questions.
That's good.
Well, thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good seeing you.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Do you know Dr. Bill? Do you know Dr. Soren?
Oh,
I see.
okay. All right.
Maybe we should talk at some point. I have some thoughts based on the TDM.
Okay.